Once again, it's your buddy, MCO, also known as Mr. Oliver, but my rap name, it's MCO. Anyway, today we're talking about this handsome lady, and, ladies can be handsome, I think, and her name is Queen Victoria. Mr. Oliver, I've heard about her. I saw a place in the mall, and it was inappropriate. No, it's not. That's not her. Queen Victoria is the longest reigning monarch. You know what? That's not true anymore. I got to change this. Because guess what, Buttercup? It's Elizabeth II now, the current reigning queen, who will not die ever. And good, I don't want her to die. She seems nice. I'm just saying that she's been in charge longer than Queen Victoria had. Up until this year, Queen Victoria had been longer. So I got to go back and change this. Here, I'm going to do it right now. There. All right. So, she is, her husband is, Albert. And Albert is not actually alive for a ton of time. She rules for a long time without him. In fact, going so far as to actually wear black for the remainder of her reign for, decades and decades, even after he is already gone, because that's what you do when you're in mourning. She is a symbol of propriety, of acting the right way. She is a symbol of duty, not like poop, I mean like, doing the right thing, and respectability. She is sometimes known as the Empress of India, because as you'll see in the next chapter, Britain had this thing going on where it was being awful to other parts of the world at the late 19th century. The imperialistic era, but basically it's really awful and racist. Sometimes she's called the grandmother of Europe. Mr. Oliver, is she called the grandmother of Europe because she's old? Well, I mean, she is eventually. I mean, not when she was born, but more because she is related to everybody. It's one of those things where she's cranking out the kiddo. In fact, here she is here. Here's Victoria and Albert. They had a lot of the babies and a lot of grandchildren. And the fun thing here is look at where it talks about other countries. You've got, there's a Prussia, and over here you've got Russia, and over here Spain. And I think you might notice a lot of people. This is the Crystal Palace exhibition. Mr. Oliver, I remember the Crystal Palace exhibition. I read about that back in the Industrial Revolution chapter. It was boring. Yep, it was. That's not a good chapter. It's not my favorite chapter. But it does have this thing. They mentioned that Britain was showing off how awesome they are and their industrial might. So they went ahead and were like, let's have an exhibition. And you might be like, so what would be like the modern equivalent? The fair. This is the first of the world's fairs. You might have heard of those, that back in the day, they used to be like really big fairs. Think like in our town, Fresno, we have like the big Fresno fair. But I'm sure your town has a fair too. And they would have a big thing where they, like all different countries would be able to come and they'd be invited and who's who of the time period and all that. It's interesting. Oh, how did they dress back then? What were the ladies wearing? I know you're saying. Well, these outfits. Mr. Oliver, why did they have such skinny waists? Well, because they wore things called corsets. And guess what, everybody? It turns out that constricting your waist really far in is actually not good for your body. It causes your inner parts to get all discombobulated and all cattywampus. And it's especially bad. Imagine what's in the 19th century, what's most women's job, and I'm not saying it should be this way, but most women were expected to make babies, and yet there's this fashion which is, discombobulating all of their innards, And it caused some women to die in childbirth because it literally, if you look here, it is realigning where everything is. I'm not just exaggerating. That's the woman who had the smallest waist ever, supposedly. I don't know if that's true. I never met her. I never measured her waist. I don't really care. I just thought you might be interested. Some of you might be out there like, well, what about bathing suits? What they wear in the bathing suits? Well, quite frankly, it was a good era if you were into modesty, because modesty is the hottest. See, at least that's what they thought back in the day, where you had your fully covered bathing suits all the way down, a little bit of calf and ankle, risque. And of course, you carried a umbrella because you didn't want to get too hot. Anyway, what about the fellas? You know what? Boring. Ladies' fashions, they change a lot over the years, but fellas, it's pretty much the same, except bright yellow pants. Yes, please. I want to be able to show up and be able to have a bright yellow pants, but that's not what the man wants to happen. Hey, Mr. Oliver, what are these things? Hey, you know, like Freddy on Scooby-Doo? It's called an ascot. It's similar, but it's not exactly the same as a tie. It's pretty dope. There was a strict moral code. You may have picked up on with how modest all of those bathing suits were, and actually the idea of the skirts and all of that was supposed to keep everything a big secret. They thought it was actually a more desirable thing to be like, oh, you know, you have several skirts on, and there's all that movement, and the boys will be like, oh, what's that sound? That's one of her 5 different skirts. Very hot. Anyway, so it's a strict moral code. The middle class really adopts this first, where they're like, look, we want to distinguish ourselves from those working class people because we're the middle class and we are no longer in that whole revolutionary reactionary thing. Back in 1848, that kind of cured us of that with all that chaos on the continent. But the working class also kind of does this, and you end up with the upper part of the working class. They call themselves the labor aristocracy. Aristocracy, kind of like the aristocrats, which is like the nobles, but it's just a reference. It's not; they're not literally nobles. They prided themselves, both the middle class and the labor aristocracy, that's the upper working class, the upper lower class, as we're going to work hard. We're going to have a lot of self-discipline. We are not going to think about naughty things. We are going to behave like gentlemen and ladies all of the time. We are going to pride ourselves on personal achievement. Mr. Oliver, a lot of that is kind of the way people think about things today. I mean, some people, right? The whole idea about like hard work, you can make something out of yourself. You respect people who've made a fortune. You respect people who have a lot of, politeness and manners. That's changing over time, but that really all comes out of the Victorian era. And of course, virtue, Christianity, these are things that are prized as part of the moral code. What about ladies and gentlemen? Well, men generally waited till they were a little older to get married. They often had younger wives. How young, Mr. Oliver? Like 12 and 14, like they always show in old movies? No, that was actually extremely uncommon. Usually, when we say men wait until they're older, we're talking like 30s, and women we're talking like 20s, like maybe early 20s. Think about if you're into those Jane Austen novels, or the movies too, Pride and Prejudice and stuff like that. Think about the age difference there. It's not crazy, but it's pronounced. So definitely there's that. And you go, why? Well, it's because men were expected to make their own, way in the world. Because remember that whole thing about prizing self-achievement. So men were thought of as being like, oh, yeah, that's right. You need to go out and be able to care for my daughter before you get married. And, there's that. Around the same time, there was more birth control used. I wouldn't even talk about this because, quite frankly, I hate talking about stuff like that. but one year the AP test had a question about birth control being used by French prostitutes or some such. I hate even talking about it at all. Anyway, they used more of it in the late 19th century. Don't look for that on the internet. Don't ever look for anything on the internet. Also, illegitimacy. They don't have a lot of it because people do get married. Now, there's always this old stereotype that nobody was, but that was happening. It just was tending to be associated with getting married once the lady was pregs. Ironically, during this time of this great moral time, prostitution is huge. And it's usually the people who claimed that they were, the prim and proper ones who were going there. You start seeing it show up in art. And the late 19th century, realism is going to be a thing. And I know you look at this picture and you might be like, realism? That's crazy looking. But they're showing what was really happening, what it was really like for the lives of the people. Probably an example you might have heard of more would be like Charles Dickens. He, of course, is famous for A Christmas Carol, but he also writes Oliver Twist. Yes, it's my name. Never heard that one before. And Hard Times, and a number of things that show how bad it was for the working classes at this time. What did people like to do for fun? Getting crunk, I believe kids say. They would get drunk. This is supposed to be a little joke here. Oh no, sir, he ain't drunk. I saw him move. It was apparently so common for the working class to go and get faded that this guy is just like, oh no, he's not dead. He's just drunk. I saw him move. The joke is he looks like he's dead, but they don't even say he's dead. You're not really drunk unless you can't move, I guess. I don't know. This is working class humor. I am a good Victorian, and I think this is beneath me. Anyway, over here is a policeman taking a drunk out of the gutter. But what stops it? How about this movement right here? Prohibition. Drunkenness was such a problem because you think about all the stuff that goes with drunkenness. It's like you're hurting your family, it costs money, maybe there's abuse going on, all kinds of terrible stuff. And so church movements began to discourage people from using it, alcohol, that is. And this is probably more famous in America because when you think of some prohibition type stuff, you think of like, oh yeah, in America, didn't they make alcohol illegal and then gangsters happened? Yeah, but it kind of starts over here in Europe. And here's some lovely ladies say, lips that touch liquor shall not touch ours. Well, good. What were people doing for fun? Bloodsports. Bloodsports are awful, Mr. Oliver. Yeah, I know. But having people get together in order to see animals kill each other was very big back in the day, and gambling on that. Eventually, in the later 19th century, sports become more common. And this right here on the right is a soccer team. I'm sorry, football. Did you know? Everybody always says that football is the European way, and just Americans say soccer. But did you know where soccer as a word originates? England. The upper class tried to call it soccer, but the working class refused to call it soccer because they thought it was too hoity-toity. So they were all like, nah, bro. We're going to call it football like everybody else. And that's why the Americans, we adopted the soccer word, and we got our own football, American football, they call it overseas. We just call it football. And that's why soccer has different names, just so you know. That's people, look at that. Look at this kid stunting up here. He's like, whoa, YOLO. And this kid's like, I'm kicking the ball. He's kind of high kicking, quite frankly. There might be a penalty involved. This person, I don't know what's happening here. Oh, what's this? I believe like tennis or some such. And yeah, of course, this is a good outfit for tennis. This is good. This is a very respectable Victorian kind of thing. And how about this fella? We got these new political parties now because more people can vote. And as the 19th century goes on, more and more people can vote. So we have people like William Gladstone who believe that, democracy, free trade, anti-imperialism, those are the important things. But that's the Whig Party. It kind of evolves into the Liberal Party. And again, free trade, democracy, individualism, this would be the modern equivalent of the Republican Party, except for maybe the anti-imperialism stuff. But that doesn't really have an equivalent because there is no imperialism nowadays. But like free trade and stuff like that. Again, liberals and conservatives, the words really have changed over the years. This is a late 19th century liberal definition, which would be like, okay, we believe people should be able to vote. Not ladies, of course, that's crazy. Not my words, their words. But Gladstone was a big leader there. You should know his name. And the conservatives have this Bob Dylan looking fool right here. That's Benjamin Disraeli. He also was a conservative. I talked about that. Now, you might notice I'm using old-fashioned words here, Whigs and Tories. You might remember those from like the Revolutionary era, if you ever studied them in American history. Basically, think of them as the liberals they come out of the Whigs, and the Tories, they evolve. Their second form in a Pokemon type sense is the Conservative Party. Disraeli is not crazy about giving people the right to vote. That's what suffrage means. He's pro-imperialism. They have basic political battles. Disraeli and Gladstone go back and forth depending on the vote, because the prime ministership is held by whichever party has the most votes. So you've got times where the liberals are in power. So that's where Gladstone's going to be the prime minister. Then you have times where Disraeli's in power because the conservatives have more seats in parliament. It's kind of interesting. Disraeli allows a little bit of suffragism here. But he says, like, look, I'm going to take a leap here, and I want more people to be able to vote with the hope those people will remember who gave them the right to vote, and they'll remember me. And Gladstone's all like, oh, you did that in 1867? You beat me that year, huh? Your party beat my party, you conservatives. Well, I'm going to up the ante and say, what about all males voting, son? And that's the Third Reform Bill of 1884. This is my favorite political cartoon in this lecture. There's only, I think, one. But this is Disraeli here. You can see he has his face on a horse, and on him is a symbol of Britain. Usually when you think of Britain, you think of one of two things. Britannia, that's kind of the more old-fashioned thing. It's usually a lady clad in kind of robes, kind of a Greek and Roman-y kind of look. Or you think of John Bull, who we'll see in the later 19th century imperialism chapter. So you can look forward to that. He's kind of where we get our inspiration for Uncle Sam from, where we go like, you know what, we need a guy to represent America. So let's have a symbol that symbolizes the whole country. Anyway, Disraeli is a horse here. He's not always a horse, obviously, but he's taking a leap into the dark. The dark is reform here. It could have worked out terribly. Britain didn't know where it was going to go. Ended up working out well. And then, like I said, Gladstone ups the ante a couple of years later, and he expands the vote to even more. But notice it was only men. There's a couple of things here you should probably know about. You don't have to memorize all of these, but I just kind of want to show it wasn't just one of the political parties that was trying to appeal to voters. This is similar kind of to how we have now, where parties will try to attract voters by doing popular things. Oh, Education Act, Universities Act, Public Health Act, Pure Food and Drug Act. And you might be like, Mr. Oliver, why is there a thing that says cocaine tooth drops? Because that is a thing you could buy when you had a toothache. You could be like, oh, you could go to your druggist, and you could be like, yo, I have a pain in my tooth. And they would be all like, we got some cocaine for that. And like today, you'd go like, all right, I'm sorry, what? No, thank you. I just say no. But back then, there was like, oh yeah, that's a drug. Let's have fair labeling here. Cocaine actually is still used all the way into the early 20th century, but they wanted to know, like, what am I getting here? Am I actually getting real cocaine, or am I getting fake cocaine? Is this snake oil to passing itself off as cocaine? I don't want to be misled. Guys, I'm going to take a little moment here. My name is Charlie Oliver. I am a teacher. I just want to let you know, you should really say no to drugs. Just because they used cocaine in the 19th century doesn't mean it's ever okay. Here's a big question. Also, is really big in the late 19th century. What about Ireland? Okay, Ireland, you might recall, with Cromwell, he had gone over to Ireland and he had messed them up. Ireland always had a kind of contentious relationship with England, and now in the later 19th century, the Irish are agitating over and over again. We want to be independent. Like, maybe we can stay in the United Kingdom, but we want to be an independent nation. We want to have our own leadership. And Gladstone's down with that. He's like, all right, here come my liberal friends. Gladstone says home rule bills, but they all get defeated. Then in Ireland, they say, okay, look, in the north, we are Protestant, and we don't want to be Catholic. Let's just say it. That's what the really problem is here. A big problem is here. It's all about religion. It's a Catholic country, and the people in the north are mostly Protestants. So they're like, we don't really want to be ruled by Catholics. We think if we're ruled by Catholics, they might treat us poorly or, whatever. So this is the beginning of, actually, the continuation of some badness. We'll have this problem today. You'll see the bluer it is, the more Catholic it is. So even back in the late 19th century, you're primarily very Catholic here. Even into the late 20th century, you're very, very Catholic. But in the north, it's not 100%. That would be this dark color here of redness. And no, but over 50%, certainly. 50% is purple. So over 50%. And you can see why the north might not want to be governed. Now, flash forward. Today, Ireland is an independent country, except for Northern Ireland, which is still part of they're still ruled by Parliament and the Queen and all that. So this is still a thing that Ireland has problems with. In the 1990s, that is, there is going to be all kinds of troubles, they call it, in the north, with Catholics and Protestants fighting over Ireland's fate. Right now there's not a lot of violence, but that doesn't mean that it's totally mellow either. Probably the most significant social welfare act in English history takes place also in the later 19th century, where David Lloyd George, kind of the successor to your Gladstone, also a liberal, introduces the People's Budget. And in it, he raises taxes on the rich to give more to the people. Health insurance for the old, pensions, unemployment insurance, all of that, it gets started here in the late 19th. Now, in the 20th century, after World War II, this is going to go even further and create a national health care system in England, as we'll see in one of the last lectures in this class. But for now, this is very, very, very progressive for the time period. And it shuts up all of the socialists. I mean, what can you say if you're a socialist in Britain? Like, oh yeah, the workers are not being taken. Oh, what? We get all of, oh. Well, the workers are not being paid. Great. Yeah, but the government's taking care of us. We have health insurance. If we're old, if we're unemployed, we have insurance. Oh, yeah. I mean, it cuts the knees out from under the socialists. and it allows England to continue to be a very strong and unified country. There's David Lloyd George right there. He's got this very bold facial hair. I'm very, very fond of that. I wish I could grow that. What about the ladies? What about all the single ladies? All the single ladies? Well, they weren't all single. Some were married. Anyway, they did organize to change discriminatory laws. Things were bad for women. We've talked about it over and over again in this class. But the suffrage movement, the idea that women should be able to vote, becomes very big, especially in the 1890s. This one shows, this is a propaganda done by women here, what a woman may be and not have the vote. And these are all noble things. A woman could be the mayor, a woman could be a nurse, a mother, a doctor or teacher, or a factory hand. But what a man can be, and he still doesn't even lose the vote, a convict, a lunatic, a proprietor of white slaves, unfit for service, or drunkard. This seems a little mean to me to say unfit for service here. The poor guy, I mean, it's probably not his fault. Maybe he had a birth defect or something. That's not cool. Pankhurst, Emmeline Pankhurst, is a strong leader in this movement, leads lots of people in hunger strikes. People get arrested. Women commit acts of vandalism, all to fight for the right for women to vote. Susan B. Anthony is kind of the American equivalent of this. Finally, by 1918, women do get the right to vote. All men over 21 and women, as long as you're over 30, have voting rights. That's kind of awful. I guess young women, why do you think? Probably because they want them to be making babies, not thinking about politics. They changed this, obviously. It becomes inclusive of all women eventually, but just an interesting little thing there. All right, I'm going to stop there for this lecture and then come back for Austria and Russia. You guys have a nice day. Peace out.